Hi, welcome to the Deep Dive, where I, the creator of the Deep End, go more in depth about each of my shows. This is the Deep Dive for the entirety of Season 2. So this is going to be run a little bit different, since obviously it's going to be hard to do a very simple spiel on the whole thing. So it'll be set up into beginning, middle, and end, and then the making, performing, and re-listening of all of them. So let's get things started. So in the beginning, when it came to making it, the show was just an idea. An idea that I wasn't fully sure if I was going to enact on or if I was just going to leave it in my head while I continued with my semester. But I decided to do it anyway, and so it got turned into the reality. And with this reality, I started having ideas for these new shows that I obviously couldn't just let sit in my head, because that would just, make me stressed out. However, ultimately, when it came to making them, it was stressless. And that's mostly because I wasn't pursued by a deadline. Because I don't know what it was, but having the deadline of the class versus just having the deadline of my show itself was completely different. I guess it's because I didn't feel pressured to get it done as soon as possible, which kind of has its benefits and hindrances, but I still made it work in the end. In the beginning, when it came to performing, I had this familiar flow with it. I had done all those shows back in season 1 or the previous semester, so it was nice to be able to do it again and kind of pick up on it as if I never left it. And what I really noticed is that I was getting really improved with the voices. I feel like I finally separated Crotten and DJ into their own characters rather than making it sound like a more depressed DJ or more hyperactive Crotten. Although, as I said before, I don't think I've ever messed up DJ's voice, but especially when more voices were included, I'm really glad that Crotten's finally developed into his own and not like someone else's. And ultimately, specifically with the beginning, I had a high confidence. There were moments where I was like, I could have done that better, but ultimately, I was like, yeah, this is what I wanted after the entirety of season 1. So then when we roll into re-listening back to it, I achieved the basic goal of overshadowing the entirety of season 1 just with the first show. Some could argue that it's not as good as some of the season 1 shows, but I feel like it is on the higher end if you compare it to them. So I'm glad I was able to. I don't like the idea of saying making you forget about season 1, but now you don't have just season 1 to go off of my whole skill. I still noted all of my mistakes. I was like, okay, I need to work on making this sound better. I need to make sure I get the timing right. Let me make sure I don't accidentally use a different format that I wasn't used to. And as I may or may not have said already, I never went back to the 6-track system. It's the 4 tracks. It's a little difficult to do, but it is what works best for me. And it had me hopeful for the rest of the semester that I could keep producing half decent, if not even amazing shows. So now when we roll into the middle of it, when we come to making, I had a very tight schedule. Now, this was one of the semesters that I've had where school was finally not really a problem. I had one class that hardly, did homework assignments. And some of the assignments we didn't really have to be they were more we suggest you, watch this article or something. But I was doing well enough in the class that I didn't need to. But the other class, had occasional project stuff, but it wasn't constant. So I got to work on it, I knew, the weeks where they were going to be a little more difficult because I had the show and this paper or something to do. What really became the stressor was work and extra stuff. Extra stuff, one, of course, being the radio show itself, although I don't consider it as much because I actively wanted to do this, and this was something I wanted to make sure was done. However, there were 2 specific things, being work and band. If you haven't guessed either from DJ or just my attitude in general, I'm pretty much a band kid, and it's really hard for me to just not be even in a simple pep band. So, especially during the one show where I said I have to leave early, that was because of band. And as much as I love doing it, I think for like season 3, I am not going to overtake band over anything else. This time it's the anything else overtakes band. So if there's a day I just am like, look, I'm sorry, I have my radio show. Even if like, oh, I'll only miss the first 30 minutes or whatever, chances are I'm gonna be more focused on trying to get the show done. Work itself, though, luckily most of my shifts are in the morning, but my weekend shifts tend to be later at night. And usually by the time I get done working, I'm less likely to want to go and do other stuff. Because it's like I get home, I eat the food I got, and then I start falling asleep, which obviously is really bad, which leads into late production. That's where I'll start doing things Sunday night or even Monday morning, which is never a good idea, by the way. So I wanted to make sure that didn't happen again later in life. But even with a lot of the like tight schedules and stuff, I still found that it was an easier time making the shows. You know, I'm still an infinite trove of just random stories I can make off of random selections of songs. Might take me a while, but I can still get the ball rolling. And once I start, it's really hard for me to stop. And so, especially with like the specific format I was using, since I wasn't trying to like pull off of like, okay, I have this story about this guy. What songs are gonna work? This one works. No. Maybe this one. No. Maybe this one. Specifically in like early, like specifically with show 2. Is that the show? Yeah, show 2. Where I was like, wow, this is very love oriented. And I'm not saying I'm against the idea of making a love story, but I didn't like when a lot of my stories almost came to the same conclusion, like, war is bad. My friends are helpful. You should, like, help me and stuff. And I didn't want to keep creating stories like that, so it makes for a much more dynamic story. Even with simpler topics, it still allowed it to be simple, easy, fun to make. When it came to performing, now that we're in the middle, I still had the older, like, flow that I had been doing, but now I had this new flow. Especially now that I've included a brand new character, and I've, like, changed up the formatting of the show itself. Like, gone is the days where it's just this character tells story and then this character plays songs. Now we have more dynamic things like this character starts telling a story but then switches to this character, and then they kind of make reference to a song but then a different character starts playing the song. And I really like being able to do that, and I hope I can perfect it or just make it more interesting so that you don't always expect it, but you don't not expect it. I'm also really glad that I had pretty improved voice differentiation. Like I said, Crichton started developing a lot more, but the inclusion of Val and the more like usage of Xander, I really wanted to make sure their voices were like distinct yet unique. So being able to just switch between them in a quick moment just like that, especially with certain shows where I'm like playing sounds in the middle of talking, I'm glad I was able to at least make it work. And I just had great enjoyment in my performances. You know, it's like every show is not just like, oh, I'm going to make this episode to appease the fans or whatever. No, this was a performance. This was me doing something and hoping you enjoy it. And here's hoping you did. Now, when we come back to re-listening to it, I was impressing myself every time. I listened back to the shows that I'm like, yeah, this is not season 1. I definitely had an improvement. I still noted my mistakes. However, I also took notice of the mistakes I actually ratified. Maybe I'm like, okay, I had a really bad habit of not playing this sound or maybe playing a sound at a certain point and I've fixed it entirely. Maybe there were times where, oh, I couldn't stop stuttering at this moment and now I can talk very casually. So it's always good to see myself, or in this case, listen to myself improving over time. And then it just puts me in a good headspace. I'm like, yes, I feel like I can still continue this, and other affairs aren't going to get in the way. All right, and now when it came to the end, when it came to making it, as you expect, I was burnt out. I had been doing this for so long. I was like, okay, this is now 18 shows. I needed just to rest. I was going to do an extra 9 shows in season 3. So I needed to just kind of like, it got to the point where I was just getting very lazy because I was like, I want to get these shows done. I want to get the semester done. But regardless, I was still trying to be ambitious. And I really hope people like recognize whenever I'm like going above and beyond for something so simple. Like, I may not like show 9 to its fullest, but I still tried to make it more interesting than just any average show that someone else could make. When it came to performing, I had like, the old flow was still kind of there, but there was this even newer flow. Now that I had so many characters, I almost completely reformatted my show from the ground up. And some people, don't like change. I myself don't always like changing things up, but this is where I felt like it actually worked. With so many characters, I'm going to have to do things to make it a lot more not as like congested. And then by this point, I started experimenting with the voices. You'll notice that like Xander, Al technically started sounding a little bit different. Some of it was just accidental, but other bits were like, I wonder if I can make them sound like this. Xander's still sounds pretty much the same, and I didn't really change much of his voice in the previous deep dive, but I still want him to like have his old voice that I've already done for him, but still this new, like, he sounds more dynamic. Because like I feel like DJ is the best at being dynamic, but everyone else, they're like trying to find it. So I want to keep working at that. And then, like, even if I'm not giving it as much effort as I wanted to, I still felt at peace while performing. I didn't go, oh my gosh, why did I do this? Or why didn't I do this? Oh, I'm so terrible. I don't know if I can do this. No, I was just like, yeah, this is the show. And I've done it. Now, finally, when it comes back to re-listening to it, in simple, I was proud. I wanted to make a growth, a progress, and I did. And speaking of the progress, I noted my progress with the mistakes. Like, there are some that I still make to this day, and chances are I'll still make even in season 3. But it's seeing how I slowly fix it. Like, remember if you listen to it, in season 1, where if I got stopped by something or other, I just couldn't continue. Or it would take me so long to continue. But now, if I'm like, oh, I don't fully remember this, well, I can make up some banter, and it's nothing to me. And final thing is just, I'm ready to finish next semester, specifically the show next semester. I still have all the ideas lined up for season 3. Now all I gotta do is put it all into the grand thing. So, hopefully, I'll still keep improving and be able to truly show what can be done with just such a... I mean, I don't like to call it a simple idea, but turning just hey, if you had a radio show, what would you do? And I get to finally show people what exactly I would do. And with that, we've finally come to the end of it. So if there was a question that I haven't fully answered, or if there's just something plaguing on your mind that you want me to maybe talk to you about, then feel free to drop it down into the comments. And whenever I get to it, I'll try to answer it. And with that, you have yourself a great day.